Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
And ghouls, it's your old pal Sick Pot 2 here with my good friend Steve Baxi, whose name I can never remember what to say. Yes, today we're here to continue Ghouly Gentlemen. We're on our last regular episode of Ghouly Gentlemen, but fear not, dear listener, or perhaps fear much, dear listener, for we'll be doing a bonus episode to be uploaded on Halloween Day. Assuming Ian remembers this time. I got to like fucking 8 o'clock on Sunday night. I was like, oh fuck, I haven't edited the episode yet last week.
I was wondering why the Predator one just came up on a Tuesday randomly.
Well, it was complicated, okay? There's a lot going on. Anyway.
It's the real ghost story.
Yeah. In all fairness, it did go up on a Monday, just very late in the evening. So anyway,
I mean, I guess that's fair.
We're doing the last movie review for this week, for this month on Ghouly Gentlemen, and that was picked by our very own good friend Steve Baxi. So Steve, what are we reviewing today?
We are reviewing the first Christopher Lee Hammer Studios Dracula movie, called Dracula everywhere in the world except the US, where it was called The Horror of Dracula, from 1958. It is not the first Hammer horror monster movie. It's either the second or the third, but it's the first Dracula one, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, it's weird to me that Hammer did so many of these, right? And they just decided to put Peter Cushing in all of them. Because I watched...
You know, I don't get that choice. Yeah, that's an interesting place to start, because he's in so many of these, and I legitimately don't understand it.
Well, like, it's weird because, you know, the Universal Monsters are the first cinematic universe, right? Like, that's where everything else, the concept of movies crossing over and, like, sequels ad infinitum, that comes from the Universal Monsters. They were the first to do it. I say that with absolutely no evidence, but I'm just gonna fucking double down because I'm an American, damn it. I don't know, there might be something, but they're the first, like, major one. They're the one that is known for it, right? Like, they did Dracula meets the Wolfman back in, like, the late 30s, early 40s. They did the fucking, all of them, right? So the concept is there, and Hammer... You know, it's the 50s, late 50s. Hammer gets the license to do all these, gets the nod, and they, instead of like planning out a universe or crossovers, they're like, well, let's just put fucking Peter Cushing in all of them. And it's so weird because I think Peter Cushing is a really good Victor Frankenstein. I think he's a less good Van Helsing. Like, he does the role fine, but, like, it seems like they could have gotten a better Van Helsing, in my opinion.
To be fair, he agrees with you, because he has done interviews where he's like, I don't understand why I'm Van Helsing either. And clearly they didn't want to do the Van Helsing from the book, so I just played myself.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually a common criticism of these movies. Christopher Lee has also done a lot of interviews, like a lot of interviews, and every single one, he's always like, I wish I got to make like an actual Dracula movie like the book, because none of the ones I was in were anything like that, and I wish I had a chance to do it all over again.
Yeah, no, like
which is kind of sad, given that he's in so many of them.
That's the thing for me watching this is like I'm kind of hyped for it. This is the first time I've ever watched this one, right? I'm kind of hyped for it. I'm like,
fun,
yeah,
okay.
fucking Christopher Lee, let's go. And it's just literally it could be anybody in the they could have gotten a dude off the street because he has 2 or 3 speaking lines, and then he just like hisses and looks imposing. You know, it is the most do nothing role for Dracula. Like literally, and I hate to say it because I know Christopher Lee is capable of a lot more, but they straight up just did not give it to him in this. Literally anyone could have played this role. This is bottom tier Dracula. This is probably not the worst, because I've seen like Dracula 3000, but this is like this is one of the lowest tier, one of the worst Dracula movies I've seen as far as just portrayals of Dracula. It's got enough else going for it that it edges up a little bit, but Dracula himself, nah. I was legitimately disappointed, I gotta say.
There's a lot of back and forth with me when it comes to him as Dracula. A lot like Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. Lee is in this as Dracula because he played Frankenstein's monster in Curse of Frankenstein. So they basically just got like the 2 title characters and brought him back for this movie. And Christopher Lee, when you hear him talk about what he wanted to bring to Dracula, he really gets it. Like, he 100% understands what Dracula's supposed to be. And there's a lot of iconic shots with him in this movie, with like the blood dripping out of his mouth, the weird sort of like zoom in close-ups that they do with him, that are Dracula's image in my mind. And then, to his credit, some of the later Hammer horror movies he does, I think he turns in a better performance and is a more iconic Dracula. Even in some of the bad ones, like I don't know if you've ever seen like The Satanic Rites of Dracula, which is not a good movie. But he's in that, and he has an interesting part to play there, and I think he does a really good performance. He's in another one called Prince of Darkness, where a lot like this, I don't think he says anything. Like, he's just a background character for most of that one.
I hate that.
So he kind of ebbs and flows with these. Like, there's a dozen of these Dracula Hammer movies. I've not seen all of them. But he's in a good number of them, and the performance kind of ebbs and flows with what the script was given. But Lee himself has never been happy with this portrayal of Dracula. Everyone involved talks about how the thing about this version that was important is that it kind of got right that the book had a sexual energy to it and that Dracula was a sexual creature. I don't see that at all. I don't understand what the fuck anyone was smoking.
It's 1958.
I have seen movies from the 50s.
No, it's 1958.
No. I have seen 50s movies. We were so much hornier than this in every other 50s movie. I promise you. Like, you cannot tell me that Dracula 1958 is a horny movie when in 1959 we released Some Like It Hot. There's just no way.
Let me posit this.
Okay.
It's a 1958 movie that is meant to, on some level, be seen by general audiences.
Nope. I do not condone that argument, because the 50s were dominated by Marilyn Monroe with movies like Niagara, which is trailer in the 50s, was just a giant waterfall with the headline that says the 2 greatest wonders in the world, Marilyn Monroe, Niagara Falls. We were so much hornier than this, I promise you, especially outside of the US, because no other country had a Hays Code like we did. So if you watch a lot of foreign films from the UK, like a lot of the folk horror stuff that came out around this time, or from Japan or from Germany, or like just any number of French movies that came out in the 50s and 60s, all of them are just so much hornier than this. Like, this movie, I could see an argument for being like horny by like 1930s Boris Karloff standards, but not by 1958. I legit do not understand that argument.
I don't know, man. I was watching this and I was like, boobs. And I looked over at Haley, I'm like, How come you don't walk around in like a lingerie nightgown? The fuck?
It's a fair question why everyone doesn't do that.
I know. Like, it's just this movie. I saw it a little bit. I mean, I guess I will concede to you that yes, there are hornier movies from the 1950s, but I don't think that makes this movie less horny. And in all fairness, I think it is hornier than previous Dracula films.
It is definitely hornier than previous Dracula.
Because I mean, like,
I'll give you that.
The only other one that comes to mind is the original Nosferatu, where he's like creeping up the stairs to go lay in bed with the woman, right? Like, otherwise, it's just not quite the same. Like, fucking, like, Lucy is in her bedroom in this, and she's like takes off the cross and opens the window and like lays in bed all like particular and stuff. That's got some stuff to it. When the bride is seducing Jonathan Harker and in order to get close and bite him, she's got like just pure cleavage.
I don't know. I don't see those as like outside the realm of the normal horniness of these kinds of movies, honestly. Even by like US movie standards, which are a lot tamer.
Again, I'm not
like
saying
this.
in comparison to other films of the era. I'm saying in comparison to other Dracula films previous to this.
Okay, sure, but I think the thing is, for a movie to feel horny, it's got to stand out in the landscape that it's trying to be horny in, or else it's just another movie. And in that sense, I feel like this is just another movie. It's not particularly horny.
I don't know. I thought this was something. I definitely got the feeling from this one. Maybe that's just me. But,
I mean, fair enough.
But
I mean, fair enough. I think there's definitely elements of it where I feel like I wish they went further. Like after Lucy becomes a vampire, and she's like taking the children out in the garden. I feel like that's where I get the most hints of it, but it's never something that I feel like is a through line with this movie. Definitely not to the degree that everyone involved in this movie feels like that's the thing they got right, because I don't think it is.
I mean, fair enough. Again, I would say compared to like the 30s films, and I've not seen all of those, so I could be wrong in this, but from what I've seen of the 30s films, I do think this is a hornier film.
It is hornier than 1930s Dracula at the very least.
Yeah.
Partly because it's 20 years.
Yeah, you know, as there's history leans left and jerks right, and sometimes it jerks left too, and sometimes it just jerks up and down and up and down and up and down.
Let me ask you this. How did you, because when we did Bram Stoker's Dracula, you were much more of a stickler for being accurate to the novel.
Okay, yes.
Well, so yeah, from your perspective, when we were talking about Bram Stoker's Dracula, your big thing, if I remember right, was because it decided to call itself Bram Stoker's Dracula, it opened itself up to criticism when it deviated from the novel significantly, which is understandable. But compared to this makes so many arbitrary changes. I was legitimately curious to think if you had problem with it, or if it was just so different it didn't matter at that point.
It's a little bit of it's so different it didn't matter. What I find interesting, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this, is why the fuck so many adaptations of Dracula just decide that Renfield and Jonathan Harker are similar enough characters they can just be combined, and we do the same shit to Lucy and Mina. I really
don't understand this movie's need to combine Lucy and Mina and swap them around. I feel like that's a fatal mistake when it comes to adaptations of Dracula. In this one, not so much, because it feels like they don't really matter much, but I don't understand the need to combine them like that, because I've actually been going back and reading the original novel again because it's been a while. And it's really interesting in like the first 100 pages or so, after you get past the stuff with Jonathan Harker in the castle, and you shift back and forth between Mina and Lucy's letters to each other, where they're just so intimate and they're so close to each other, and they talk about each other like they're sisters. There's definitely a little bit of like, were they supposed to be gay or not, with the way they talk about how much they love each other and how much they miss each other, and how being around their suitors is nowhere near as nice as being around each other, which is really interesting. And part of the heart of the book is watching Lucy's slow decline and watching Mina kind of slowly move away from her because she's trying to nurse Jonathan back to health is really tragic. And like, that's what makes that book work by the end, is that you see the human toll of what Dracula has done to this woman. So when you just kind of shove Mina and Lucy to the side, I feel like you kind of missed the thing that made the book good.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people get really distracted by the manliness aspect of the characters in Dracula. You know, you've got Jonathan, you've got Van Helsing. There's like, there's another
that weird Texan dude.
Yeah, the Texan dude. And then there's another guy whose name escapes me at the moment.
The doctor, what's his face? Dr. Stewart or something.
Yeah.
Dr. Stewart.
There's like 4 or 5 guys trying to help Lucy and deal with Dracula and stuff and all at once. And I'm reasonably okay with them kind of getting condensed down to Van Helsing and some other dude. You know, like that's... that's reasonable to me. I still think Jonathan Harker needs to not be in that crowd, but that's like a debate that could be had.
Jonathan Harker Vampire Hunter is really dumb, I think.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Yeah, there's that. But that's the other thing, is like so many things will combine Renfield and Jonathan Harker. And I don't, like, you could not have 2 more distinct characters. It's just the fact that both of them go to visit Dracula in his castle, I feel. Like, that's all it comes down to is, oh, well, this is basically just the same thing again. Well, like, no, it's not. This is kind of fucking important, my guys.
Yeah, because in the novel, you meet Renfield when he's already in the asylum and it's clearly gone nuts, and you see him going and bending to Dracula as well, and like trying to feed spiders and capturing flies and shit, like he's completely lost his mind. And you see Jonathan kind of slowly get to that point and then resist and come out the other side. So like they're supposed to, a lot like Mina and Lucy, be on 2 opposite trajectories that just parallel each other. And none of the adaptations ever seem to want to do that.
Yeah, no, it drives me up the fucking wall. I don't understand why they do it. And so, like, this is... I'm not, like, particularly mad at this because it might just be another in the long line that fucking does it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we really need a Dracula adaptation that just... I need a great cinematic Renfield. You know, it's such an interesting and, like, fundamentally creepy fucking character to have this guy who's become the servant of the vampire, right? And they just never do him right. Like, it's...
You're getting him next year. You're getting Renfield next year.
I'm getting Renfield next year? When? Like, we're getting just a Renfield movie?
There's literally a movie coming out called Renfield, where it takes place, and it's basically the story from Renfield's perspective. And Renfield's played by Nicholas Hoult, and Dracula's played by Nicolas Cage.
I don't know what to think about this. I'm both excited and terrified by all the information you gave me. And I want to just say, just like, kudos to you for like the restraint you showed in waiting to say Nicolas Cage until the very end of that sentence.
Nicolas Cage Dracula is peak 2022 movie casting, and I'm here for it. But the other curveball in this is that it's written by fucking Robert Kirkman.
Okay. I don't know. We'll see what it turns into.
Continue.
Yeah, no, it's just like I just want a good Renfield. I feel like Renfield's an interesting enough character in his own right, and it's kind of driven me crazy that I don't think that character's ever been adapted properly. Like, again, the closest we get is Bram Stoker's Dracula, but even then, I'm not 100% here for it. And then secondary to that, we get Dracula Dead and Loving at Renfield.
Speaking of Renfield performances, my friend took me to the ballet recently because they were putting on a ballet version of Dracula. Mm-hmm. And Ballet Dracula 1 fucking rules. If anyone sees a Dracula ballet in their area, go watch it. It fucking rules. But one of the standouts from the play was that they actually try and maintain, even in the ballet form, the journals. So there's actually a narrator through it, and it's the doctor taking care of Renfield. So after like every scene, you cut to Renfield in the asylum, and it's the funniest shit I have ever seen. It's so entertaining to watch Renfield on stage like that. So if you want another good Renfield performance, check out the ballet.
I might have to. I don't know. That sounds like a fucking trip.
It's very like 1930s slapstick comedy with dancing. It's kind of great.
Yeah, I don't know. Just fucking like, I just love him in Dracula Dead and Loving It. It's the best one.
To your point about combining the characters too, you're right. There are certain situations where I feel like it's warranted because Lucy's got like the 3 guys that propose to her. She's got the doctor that takes care of her, and she's got Van Helsing. So there are just 5 characters whose entire purpose is to figure out what the fuck is going on with Mina or with Lucy. So having all of them in a movie of any length seems kind of pointless to me. Especially Quincy, like random Texas dude who's in the book early on to just be generically from Texas and kind of contribute nothing is not particularly interesting. So putting all of those guys together into like one guy plus Van Helsing, I think makes a lot of sense. I'm just confused by why they wife swapped Mina and Lucy.
I don't know.
And then, like, I don't entirely understand the choice to make Jonathan Harker actually work for Van Helsing and send him over to try and kill Dracula at the beginning of the movie, instead of just doing the thing from the book, because the character who actually does that is in the movie.
I don't know. I don't...
Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if you have Arthur and you have Van Helsing, why did you make Jonathan into Arthur?
I don't know. These are weird choices that are made, and they litter Dracula adaptations to the point where, like, I don't feel like we adapt Dracula at this point. You know, I feel like it's been done so many times, and there's been so many like creative choices and decisions made to combine characters and leave out plot details and remove things, that everyone's just kind of got their own idea of what the story of Dracula is without ever actually reading Bram Stoker's book.
Yeah.
It's such a bizarre thing that I don't comprehend, but here we are.
And I think Dracula too, because I think there's a lot of characters that have kind of existed through all forms of media throughout their entire life, and so you get a lot of disparate versions where I think all of them are kind of interesting and valid in their own way. I think a lot of comic book superheroes that are that old kind of have that, where Superman is so much defined by like the radio show and the George Reeves show and the Fleischer cartoon, that if someone said that their idea of Superman is like the Fleischer cartoon instead of like the 1940s comics, it makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. With something like Dracula, I feel like the visuals of Bela Lugosi as Dracula and Christopher Lee as Dracula stick in people's heads, and like the sort of big gothic moments where he says things like, children of the night, what music they make, and shit like that. Like the aesthetic is kind of there, but there's really nothing quite like going back and looking at that original story, or even watching the Francis Ford Coppola Bram Stoker's Dracula, because the book is just so well written and it's structured so well, and there's nothing about any of the adaptations that ever feel like they're doing on film anything anywhere near as unique as what the book was doing on paper.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. So like we're in this weird place with this one, right? Where I'm like, the performance, unfortunately, isn't really anything to write home about. You know, I wish it was better, but fucking Peter Cushing is playing just the flattest Van Helsing in the world.
Oh god, yeah, he's so dull.
He has like, because you're rereading Dracula. Have you gotten to like the letters from Van Helsing yet?
Yeah.
Okay, my favorite fucking running joke in that book is Van Helsing's sign-off for each of his letters, where he just starts listing all of his fucking degrees.
I know, it's so funny.
Literally the best fucking
thing
joke
with the
ever.
book- His dialogue in the book is really interesting too, because when you read novels like this, whether it's like Dracula or Frankenstein or Jekyll and Hyde, where it's like letters stitched together, your mileage kind of varies chapter to chapter because like if the writer does a good job, every person sounds different. And so you might get a chapter where like reading this person's like diary entry is boring as shit. Or reading this other person's diary entry is amazing and it's full of really interesting gossip and really cool character stuff. Van Helsing's letters and diary entries are by far the worst to kind of physically read. But the dude is so fucking funny and so unhinged, and he just like says shit to people, and he like then dials it back because he realizes they're afraid of him. And I don't think we've ever done that in a movie, except maybe Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, no, I fucking love it. Like that, the fact that he lists every single one of his degrees, and this is like the most learned man in history, right? And he's just like such a. And he fucking knows, right? He's the most learned man in the world, and he knows he is. And he's like just kind of big dick energy when he walks in the room, and he can just tell everyone what to do. And you just don't get any of that from Peter Cushing here. He's just so like reserved and proper and quiet, and like there's that scene early on in the movie where he goes to the inn, and he's like, I know what this garlic's about. And I don't think it's superstition. I know that it's his. Like, no, he's like, he's got no, even if that's written, you could do something more with that. You could, like, have some harumph to that, and play that up. But they just don't. And, I'm sorry, I think Peter Cushing is a really good actor, especially for his time, but in this, he just doesn't do anything with Van Helsing, and it's, like, super disappointing. Christopher Lee just doesn't get anything to do. Like, how do you make a Dracula movie that Dracula's barely in?
He's in it for, like, 3 big scenes. He's in it in the beginning. He's in it when he's, like, luring people over, and then there's the big climactic fight where he dies, which is... Okay, well, can we go to the end real quick? Because Dracula's death scene is the most unintentionally funny thing I have ever watched.
Oh, you don't like the, sunlight melting kind of thing?
It's not that I don't like it. It's just that, like, the way they play it is just so unintentionally corny and so funny. Where, like, turning him to sand is one thing, but when he's just kind of laying there limp on the floor, and they're just kind of, like, tiptoeing the floor is lava around him, it's just really bad, I feel.
Fair enough. I don't know. I didn't really have a problem with that. I liked the effect for him turning to ash, especially because of how they establish it. Like, once you kill a vampire, like, their natural state returns. So you get that with, like, the bride. She turns into an old woman because that's what she should have been. You get that with Lucy. She turns into the lovely girl she was. And then Dracula's just... There's nothing left. He's just the vampire now, and he just melts away. That's kind of cool. So there's good ideas in it, and there's like thought. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot of problems with this movie.
There's a level of... This is the 1950s equivalent of, like, a B movie in a lot of ways, because the budget at the time is ridiculously low. It's only like, it's like less than $100,000 that they made this whole movie for.
It's like 5 locations tops and 4 actors.
Yeah, like, it's got barely any people in it. It's got 2 major set pieces, which is just the castle and the office, and then occasionally other sporadic areas that they could film in. They shot the whole thing in, like, no time at all, and it made a ridiculous amount of money. And I think what's fun to look at historically is that there's a lot of B movies that come out now where we're like, okay, yeah, that's dumb fun, but that's not cinema. And then you watch older movies that are like that too, but because they are rerun a lot, or because they get a lot of sequels, or because they kind of create like this visual legacy, like Christopher Lee's Dracula ends up doing, we kind of go back and think of them as better than they were. And this is probably a prime example of it, where it's not a bad movie, but it is very clearly a B movie, and I would not put this on, like, top tier horror classics like most people seem to.
Yeah, no, I don't think this should qualify. It's got a lot, like, it's interesting in that kind of like looking back way. It's like going back and watching like an episode of ER with George Clooney in it. You know?
Yeah,
it's like, oh man, this is before he like he made it here. Like this was a big deal for his career, but this was before he was like George Clooney. You know? Like so that's kind of what it's like watching fucking Christopher Lee more so because like Peter Cushing, like this was kind of just his bread and butter. This is just kind of what he did, and like I think we have like a grander sense of Peter Cushing because of Star Wars. But Star Wars was like 100%. A late in life thing for him. That was like kind of like a revival to his career more than anything.
Yeah, Peter Cushing's career trajectory is interesting because he's a classically trained actor and he worked a lot on the stage and did a lot of Shakespeare adaptations. And then he got the bump up to do these movies. And you could actually see the thought process behind it because the idea was he's classically trained, he's on the stage, he understands 17th and 18th and 19th century kind of oldie dialogue. So if we take these Gothic stories that were written in the 18th and 19th century and put him in the starring roles, he could probably bring a lot to it, which you're right, he totally could. If you had a script like that and it wasn't just a B movie.
No, I mean, and in all fairness, I think that him as Victor Frankenstein fucking hits. Like,
he's great. He's great in that movie.
It is night and day between that and this. And I gotta wonder if he was just, like, in a studio contract, because they did the same thing back in the 30s, right? Like, why the fuck is Boris Karloff both Frankenstein's monster and the Mummy? That's weird, right?
No, I agree. I think it's gotta be something like that, where, like, at a certain point, you just kind of had to do a bunch of these movies, so you did. And when he was doing these, he did have a lot of, like, back and forth hits, because, like, Victor Frankenstein he does great in, and he's bad as Van Helsing. But then he plays Sherlock Holmes like a year later and he's great in that. So like he just kind of goes back and forth a lot. I guess it's just a matter of like, was he feeling it this month or not?
I don't know.
Because they shot these also like back to back to back. There's like no delay between any of these coming out. Like 2 or 3 of them used to come out a year and he used to be in 2 of them a year.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds about right. It's just like, I think and I don't think anything's like changed in horror, right? Like the old fucking 30s horror movies, like, what's her name? The fucking actress. John Hughes did the original John Hughes, not the 80s John Hughes. Did the did like Invisible Man and like some of the Frankenstein movies, right? I'm thinking of the right name, or is it a different director?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I will look it up real quick.
Okay, well, the fucking director for the Invisible Man and Frankenstein and stuff, he cast this same fucking woman in all of them, and he clearly did it based entirely on the fact that this bitch can scream, and that is all she can do. Is she can fucking hoot and holler and just yell her fucking head off, and she's in
most of the ones that you're talking about, the old Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man, all of that shit was all directed by a guy named James Whale.
James Whale. Okay, yeah, sorry, I was getting fucking names mixed up. I'm like, no, John Hughes, that's the 80s guy with the teen romances. Like, no, maybe there's 2 of them? Sorry, so, like, but, like, he would cast the same fucking woman and everything, and Boris Karloff was in so many of those. And I think, like, you know, just, frankly, horror hasn't changed in that way, right? Like, you go to the more modern day. I'll start with like the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Is they get like 1 or 2 actors who are of note, and they get them on set for like a day, and then they just film stuff with them, and that way they can put their name on the trailer, on the poster, and they make these things for dirt cheap, at least for the first one, and then they have a hit on their hands, and then they fucking start pumping them out and pumping them out and pumping them out.
Well, like To your point, you have this in the 80s with Jamie Lee Curtis, where they make Halloween. They do the exact same thing they did with the Hammer Days by hiring Donald Pleasance, who was in these kinds of movies for a really long time, even though he had some big blockbuster stuff like James Bond, to kind of give it credibility. And then they find one person without much of a career yet, like Jamie Lee Curtis, to be in it. They hit it off big, and then suddenly in 1978 or 1980, Jamie Lee Curtis goes from being in no movies and in 1 horror movie to being in 3 horror movies back to back to back.
Yep, no, that's about right. That's just the way they do them. That's just how they pump them out. It's the like. It is fascinating to me that the horror, like, the horror franchise, the horror universe, the filmmaking side of horror has its own fucking playbook. Like, superhero movies have their own playbook, but they're like almost identical to just the blockbuster playbook. Rom-coms are like a financial write-off for the studio to make a little bit more money so they can make the big movies, right? Like there's all these ins and outs.
Yeah, just constant revenue stream.
Yeah, but horror movies have just such a particular fucking thing that I just don't think you see replicated in quite the same way anywhere else. It's fascinating too.
And I think horror movies also have been on the two kind of like artsy versus B movie extremes longer than anything else, because for as long as there have been horror movies, there has been B movie schlock like the Trauma movies, and there's been artistic attempts on really low budgets like Blair Witch. Like, we just do this constantly, whether it's this year doing Barbarian and Terrifier 2 at the same time, or it's the 1950s doing like this kind of shit on one end and like The Exorcist on the other. Exorcist might have actually been a little bit later, but you get my point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just that this is the way that they did things, and I'm like, I guess more power to you, but Jesus fucking Christ, is it confusing? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why we don't get like prestige horror films very often, and when they do, sometimes they kind of suck ass.
And that's kind of what they tried to do in the 90s with Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like the idea was like, let's really take this literary approach to it and make like this prestigious horror blockbuster. And he turned it into a gothic romance and added a lot of stuff that wasn't in the book. And I think that movie really worked for those reasons. But I have never seen a horror movie since then that's really worked that way. Even when they try to like add prestige to a pre-existing horror IP. Because they tried to do that with 2018 Halloween when they rebooted that, because the idea was it's kind of become B-movie schlock. Let's get back and let's hire like a director. Let's make a plan for it. Let's make like a modern version of this. And it sucked. It's just Halloween H2O, but bad. And I don't know why we don't have like more middle of the road kind of horror movies where like there's a modest budget and there's kind of a rom-com expectation of success, instead of these two weird extremes where like you're either watching like Malignant, which fucking rules but is B-movie territory, or you're watching like Halloween Kills, which is just fucking trash. I'm just ragging on Halloween today.
It's easy to do. The worst.
Yeah, it's because I watched them all too many fucking times.
The worst horror franchise is Halloween.
I mean, I don't know, man. Have you watched all of the Friday the 13th movies?
I feel like Friday the 13th very quickly transitioned to just being schlock, you know?
I don't think it was ever not schlock. I just don't think it was ever good schlock.
I don't know. I think it kind of knew what it was. I think Friday the 13th kind of knew what it was going for. Whereas...
You know what, though? I know your opinion and my opinion on the worst horror slasher franchise is the same because we reviewed 2 of them and hated them both. Hellraiser.
Hellraiser is pretty fucking bad.
Hellraiser is really
Hellraiser was never good.
I remember when the new one came out, everyone was like, "Oh, it's we're finally back and we're finally making one that's like the original." I'm like, "Oh, so it's bad?"
Maybe we should review the Hellraiser novel next year. We'll have a whole year to like prep and read a novel, which seems like enough advance notice for Geeky Gentlemen. But I'm just like, maybe there's something good in this franchise. Just maybe.
I can tell myself to read a page of that novel a day for a year until it's done and we do our review, and I probably still wouldn't get through it.
I don't know. Like, from what I hear, the book sounds good. The problem is the films.
See.
I don't know.
If you want to, I will commit to reading it at some point.
Yeah, maybe. Like, fucking getting me to commit to read a novel is like Steve reads novels when he's bored. I have to like sit down and like, all right, let's go. And then the fucking like Rocky music starts playing.
Audible. I'm gonna get you an Audible subscription for Christmas.
That'd be amazing of you, Steve. You'd be my best friend.
Do you actually like audiobooks? Is that a thing for you?
Yeah, no, I love audiobooks. Like, a lot of people just can't focus on audiobooks, whereas I... Like, you know that thing where you start reading a page and then your mind wanders and then you keep reading?
Yeah.
I fucking do that constantly. I'm so bad about that. So audiobooks, for whatever reason, I can keep track of. Like, I'm almost done with my 8th Doctor stuff, so it might be a good time. But yeah, like a fucking... Anyway, back to Dracula.
Back to Dracula. We meandered a bit.
A little bit. Here on Geeky Gentlemen, we embrace the tangent. There's my fucking ancient catchphrase for this series. No, like, there's stuff in this movie that I legitimately think is, like, cool, but it's all, like, in retrospect. Very little of it is to do with, like, the film itself and things that it is doing. It's all like, oh man, Christopher Lee was in this before he got old. Even then, he still kind of looked a bit old, didn't he? Then it's like, oh hey, look, it's the guy from Star Wars, and oh hey, look, it's Batman's butler.
That was a weird one. I actually had to stop for a second. I'm like, wait, is that fucking Alfred?
Yep. No, I knew that he was in the movie going into it, but I couldn't, like, figure out who he was. But at a certain point, I'm like, well, there's, like, no one fucking else in this movie, so either he's one of the random bystanders, or it's the guy that Van Helsing's with the whole time. It turns out it was the fucking guy.
Wait. Okay, sorry. One more random aside, and then I'll make your point. But, like, if this movie has taught me anything, it is that 90% of middle-aged white British men look identical, and I can't tell them apart.
Oof. Damn.
Because all of the men in this movie, I'm just like, is that Peter Cushing? No, wait, that's Peter Cushing. Is that Michael Goff? No, that's Michael Goff.
Ah, damn. I mean, that's kind of impressive because there's like 5 characters in this movie.
I know, I got very confused. Sorry, continue.
No, that's all good. Let's talk about some positives, because I feel like we have been pretty negative to this. So let's talk about some stuff we liked. I really liked the bribe scene and just how simple it was. There was like just no build up to it, no like real acknowledgement that it happened. It just kind of did. I liked that. That was good.
I think his Christopher Lee's outfit as Dracula is really iconic and kind of stellar. I feel like he just has like the look absolutely perfect. And when he is doing like those hisses with the blood running down his mouth and like the bloodshot eyes, in my mind, that's just kind of what Dracula looks like. I didn't grow up watching this movie in particular. I didn't watch this movie for the first time until like last year. But I've seen other Christopher Lee Dracula movies over my lifetime. So his style of doing Dracula is kind of something that's burned into my brain. And I do really like that bit of him here, even though in this particular movie he doesn't get a lot to do. So that was cool. And I feel like despite it being a very simple set, I liked the way the castle looked and that it had its little catacombs with his coffin, and it wasn't trying to be too busy or too extravagant. It just kind of felt like an old rickety manor in the British countryside.
Yeah, no, the castle was cool. I liked a lot of that. It was a little funny that it just looked so like well kept, because usually like the thing with Dracula's castle is it's kind of like the basis for a lot of that haunted house stuff. It's like spider webs and it's like falling apart kind of things, you know?
The thing in the novel that's really funny is that he says he has housekeepers. And so he'll get Jonathan to like sit somewhere in like the lounge or something and be like, don't worry, your supper will be prepared soon. My servants will do it. Then we'll just literally disappear for an hour and do it and then pretend to leave. But he doesn't actually have any servants, so he's just doing it himself and no one caught on.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's good stuff.
I love that it takes Jonathan so long to figure it out, too, where he's like, Dracula says the servants are making me dinner. He's been gone for an hour.
Oh, here's my dinner. Yeah.
Jonathan's such a dumbass. I love it.
Nah, he is. He's the original himbo.
Keanu's performance gets a lot of flack, but I see what he was getting at now.
Yeah, no, fair. Still a weird choice.
No, absolutely a weird. I'm not excusing the performance, but I see what he was trying for now.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other stuff I like for this.
I love the music.
Yeah, the music's
I
good.
love how over the top the music goes.
Yeah, no, that fucking guy is slamming on that piano. Like,
Yeah,
for
man, that
real.
dude's playing straight fire. It sounds like an organ that you would hear in a 1930s movie. It's really, really extravagant and completely just like wrecks whatever's happening in the scene just so you can hear the crazy music and it just kind of makes the moment.
Yeah, no, that's good. But I mean, like, literally, he is just pounding that fucking piano. Like, that dude is doing, like,
Oh yeah.
arms way above his head and then just crashing down on those keys. I feel bad for his fingers. Like, there is no chill whatsoever. So there's that. I like the bride, and I like the premise that the bride's death is the thing Dracula's getting like revenge on in this. That feels reasonably unique to this one, and I thought that was kind of a cool little detail to add to it. But in general, I just like the bride scenes. I thought she got just a lot of cool scenes where she was like just manipulating Jonathan and stuff. I thought that was kind of neat.
And this is another change from the book that actually doesn't bother me. I like that the way they reorganize the journey to Dracula's castle. Instead of Jonathan going through the town and getting weird looks at people and then arriving at the castle and being trapped, which is great in the book, I like for like a movie that's less than 90 minutes, he just gets to Dracula's castle, and then when he goes missing, Van Helsing shows up and tries to retrace his steps. I like that there is kind of immediate consequence for Dracula killing Jonathan like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea of Van Helsing actually being a hunter, finding where Jonathan went and working his way up to the castle and finding his diary and stuff. I think from a narrative standpoint on a film, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you there. I thought that worked pretty well. I don't know. There's a lot going on with this that I think is just kind of interesting, kind of cool, but it's just I don't feel like there's quite enough of it to justify some of the other decisions and some of the other like mistakes that it makes.
It does sort of feel like they're just kind of trying to rush out a Dracula movie because Frankenstein was good.
Mm-hmm. I could agree with that.
Which, I mean, fair, but it feels like you can see the seams. And, like, they course correct pretty hard with the next one because Bride of Dracula is really good.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, again, because they just want to pump these out at a constant rate, the quality control is not there. So you'll have something like Bride of Dracula that's worth watching, or like Satanic Rites that's worth watching. But then you'll have all of these random ones sputtered throughout that are not, where like Christopher Lee's too busy shooting a different Hammer movie, so he doesn't have enough time to be in this other Hammer movie where he's the title character.
Yep. Choices were made. I don't know. I like the reveal that Dracula's coffin was just in the house. I thought that was pretty well done.
Him having Jonathan kill the bride so quickly after, or the vampire lady so quickly after meeting her, and then Dracula immediately like hearing the cry disappearing. That's a legitimately kind of tense moment, I feel like.
Yeah, it's just you're kind of left with like that horror movie. What the fuck are you thinking? Thing where he's like, he's got the bride and he's got Dracula in the same room. Why the fuck does he kill the bride first?
Now, but to be fair, that's probably one of the most violent staking through the hearts in a vampire movie, if not by this point, definitely in general, because like he is like literally hammering it through her chest and she is screaming in pain. That doesn't usually happen. It's usually just kind of like Buffy style poke and dust.
I wish I could appreciate the scene. I really do. Unfortunately, Mel Brooks just ruined it for me, and I will forever think about the just blood fucking everywhere.
That's fair. That's fair. I didn't think of that.
She just ate! Like, I'll never be able to think of anything else anytime I see a vampire get staked into the coffin anymore. It's so fucking funny.
That's another thing about these Hammer horror movies is that so many of them have gotten lampooned or parodied elsewhere so often that going back to the original just kind of feels wrong. Like I know all the jokes making fun of it before I know the thing it's making fun of. So I have a hard time seeing it for what it actually is.
Mm-hmm. No, I can appreciate that. It's a weird one.
Speaking of comedies and Mel Brooks, there are Bugs Bunny cartoons I remember watching that I now realize in retrospect were making fun of this movie.
Oh yeah,
So that's fun.
that's funny. Is it anything with oh, what's his fucking name? Why can't I remember his name? The red guy, the
Yosemite Sam?
no the monster.
Oh, fuck.
Gossamer.
What's his name? The
Gossamer.
big hair. Yeah, Gossamer, the big red monster with the weird fingernails.
Yeah. Were any of them Gossamer?
So a lot of those Bugs Bunny trapped in a castle ones are actually making fun of the old monster movies with Bela Lugosi and stuff. But there was like a handful of like the later like Chuck Jones era Bugs Bunny cartoons that are making fun of the Hammer movies, where like literally Peter Cushing is animated in the cartoon.
Ah, that's funny. Okay.
The one I remember distinctly, and I didn't understand this until now, is it's a guy who looks like Peter Cushing, who's in a haunted castle, and he does all of the jobs in the castle and pretends like he's different people. And I'm like, oh, it's because that's what he was literally doing. I get it now.
Fair enough. I can't seem to find. Yeah, I don't. I just searched Peter Cushing Looney Tunes and nothing came up. I'm sad.
I'm sure if you thumb through the HBO Max collection of Looney Tunes cartoons, because I think they have all of them, you can probably find it on there somewhere.
Did they have the racist ones?
You know what? That's a good question. I don't know.
I'm gonna be disappointed if they don't. You know me, Steve. I like my racist cartoons.
You know, I mean,
I like my
and you
women.
should,
I
you
like
should.
my women like I like my racist cartoons. Complete that sentence. I just want. There's the challenge in the comments.
Oh my god, that's fantastic. I don't have a ton more to say about this one. I didn't hate it. I was very entertained watching it, but I am confused by choices that were made.
I don't know. I didn't love it. Anytime we're doing a review on these movies, even if I'm not enjoying them, I do try to make an effort to give them my time, right? To not get distracted, not do anything. I have to admit, I ended up pulling out my phone a couple times on this one. I just couldn't stick with it, and in a lot of parts, it was just boring to me. So
I also feel like that's a damning thing to say, especially in a movie that is literally less than 90 minutes.
right, like that's the thing is I looked
Like,
at it.
how could you be boring?
I stopped it at one point to go get some food, and I was like, oh man, I'm already half an hour into this. This movie's really moving. And I ate my food, and I'm like, this is taking some time.
After you get to the point where Van Helsing's like, I found Harker's diary, everything after that is boring as shit.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. It's not my favorite. I'm trying to think if there is an adaptation of Dracula, like not that's just a fully original take, but just like an adaptation of the novel that is at least good all the way through and not infuriating. Because I like things about Bram Stoker's Dracula, but I get too annoyed with it. I'm left.
I
in
mean,
this
in my
place.
opinion, that's probably the best one. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula, but in terms of like other ones that are just beginning to end good, I mean, have you ever seen the original Bela Lugosi one?
Yeah, it was okay.
You don't like that one?
It's all right. It's the 30s, you know.
That's fair. That's fair.
So there's just a lot of stuff. There's cinematic language and shit that just doesn't work. I don't know. It's still hilarious to me, but fucking Dracula Dead and Loving It is a more accurate adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula than Bram Stoker's Dracula. And in a weird way, I guess that might be one of my favorite Dracula movies.
I mean, There's definitely nothing wrong with that. And I mean, at this point, we've gotten so many Dracula movies. The fact that he's in the public domain, I'm sure there's like something out there that's probably a more accurate one that you would like. But why on earth would you put yourself through watching all of the Dracula B movies that exist to eventually find that one diamond in the rough?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. It's just what I think. I'm trying to remember if we've reviewed Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Probably at this point. I feel like we've talked about it before, but if we haven't, I'd be down to review that because I haven't watched it in a while.
Yeah. So we've done a character discussion on Dracula. We've done Bram Stoker's Dracula. We've done Dracula, the BBC series, and then YouTube starts.
Oh, that was an unfortunate series.
Yeah, no, it starts so good and fails so hard.
It's a quintessentially Moffat kind of TV show where like everything I love about it is a very good Moffat thing, but everything I hate about it is a very Moffat thing.
Dracula Untold is something we've done. I feel like we discuss a Dracula movie or thing every year, like without fail. I feel like we've done one every year.
It's a part of that's got to be subconscious because like whenever I think of horror month, my brain just always goes, "Oh, I should pick a Dracula thing." It's been a while since we talked about Dracula, as if we're just supposed to talk about Dracula.
Probably about a year, if I had to, add a guess.
Yeah, because like my other thing was gonna be like, depending on what we think about this, maybe next year I'll make us review like the Bela Lugosi Dracula, or maybe we can do a re-review of Dracula Untold after like 11 years at this point and see how we feel about it.
I don't know. It's funny. Yeah, I guess we've never done Dracula Dead and Loving It, so maybe next year. Anyway,
no one cares about Thanksgiving if you want to save it for November.
No, I love History Month.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So anyway, let's go ahead and go on to ratings for this film then. Steve, what would you rate Dracula or the horror of Dracula?
I will give the horror of Dracula, because I'm an American, damn it, 2 out of 5 oddly horny night dresses.
Yeah, okay, alright. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I have a fairly low opinion of this movie. So I'm going to give it 2 out of 5 cleavage.
Excellent.
Yes, good choice.
Two of them, I see.
Yep, 2. What's not to love? She's rich, she's beautiful, she's got great big tracts of land.
Have you ever seen that movie, The Parallax View?
No, I don't think so.
It's got one of the greatest lines of dialogues I've ever heard, where a guy's at a bar and the waitress is leaning over with her giant boobs and offering him a drink, and she's like, martinis are a lot like boobs. 1 is not enough and 3 is too many. I'm like, shit, that's good.
Alrighty. Yeah, so that'll do it for this episode, and we'll be back tomorrow from the listener's perspective. Steve and I are going to record this right now. We'll be back tomorrow with a special discussion topic for Halloween Day, where we will be discussing horror art. And I don't mean like the art of how to scare you. I mean literally like illustration, sculpture, what is done and the visualization of horror in art forms. Might talk about cinema a little bit, but I'm kind of most interested in just like things that are a singular piece, as it were, because that's been on my mind lately, so I figured it'd be fun to talk about. All right, until next time, everyone, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am searching for a good Dracula movie.
And we are your cool gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.